Okay, welcome everybody, good evening. We are live now, and the meeting on the City Council Committee on Finance on the 4th of May, Monday 2020 will begin. Madam Clerk, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Leobi.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilman Castillo is absent. Councilman Anthony.
Present.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
We have 4 present and 1 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let the record reflect that Council President Matos is present. Council President Pro Tem Correa is present. Councilman Espinal is present. I think we have the internal auditor present, and I think that's what we have at this time. All right. So let's do just some quick housekeeping measures for the committee's edification, but more importantly, for all the administration that's coming before this committee. You need to submit your items. We're going to be submitting 2 dockets from two exhibits tonight from administration. I know the committee members just received it, so do we just right now. As we mentioned last week, I need to remind the administration that the Mr. Clerk and Madam Clerk needs to receive those exhibits well in advance, at least the morning of the meeting, so they can make sure they get it out to committee members, council members, and they have the appropriate copies and et cetera. So as a reminder, we need the administration to work with us on that in order to expedite and move these hearings forward. But it's important that stuff gets done, be submitted early, the earlier the better. But 1 minute before the meeting beginning is not going to work for us, okay? So, and that's just going to hamper the budget process and our ability to do this. So, I see numerous people from administration. Mr. Mancini, you're on the line. I believe the finance director is on the line too, Sarah Silveria. You can unmute her. Right. So if you both just recognize and ask your departments to have that information earlier, okay? Thank you. So let's, committee members, let's do this. Since it's all the similar conversation, we're to take items 1 through 4 up at the same time, and then we'll then enter into the exhibits and then go to, discussion. So can I have a motion to take item 1 through 4 up?
So moved.
Second.
By Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, so let's enter into the record if we could. Many members should have received it. So let's into the record. I have the assessor. It looks like it's going to be exhibit. What's going to be the number now? We're going to.
You want to stop?
Yeah. Okay. This will be we had exhibit A was the budget book.
A and B.
B was the.
And we had C and D.
Okay.
Because we knew that you were missing.
So now we'll go to. Okay. So we're going to numbers now. Okay. So for budgetary purposes, we're going to call it. No, for this, we'll call exhibit B1, so you know budget exhibit. Okay. So can make a motion to enter into identified as B1, and it's a multi-page document entitled Tax Assessors. It encompasses tax assessor review, tax assessor organizational chart, etc. Approximately 10 pages into as exhibit B1.
So moved.
For items 1.
Second.
Vice Chair, Councilman Taylor, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Next, I'd like to enter into an exhibit as exhibit B2, Madam Clerk. And this is a multi-page document identified as the city, from the city collector's office. And it's a multi-page, approximately 10 pages. Once again, it's the 3-box report with the appropriate organizational chart and additional information attached. Motion to enter that into the record as exhibit B2.
So moved.
Budget hearing.
Second.
By Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Motion. Thank you. All right. So why don't we start off with, I think we have the tax assessor on the line. Is that correct?
We do.
So, Mr. Clerk, Madam Clerk, why don't we swear in the individuals who are going to testify on this item, discussion about tax assessor's office.
Assessor Barrett, Yeah, and everyone else, do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Thank you. So, Assessor, would you like to just take us through what's been submitted as this Exhibit B1 and tell us what's going on in this department, please?
Sure. Larry, do you have, I don't know if someone can share their screen, have those electronically, I can walk through them, or I don't know.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, if I may, would like to utilize the same process that we have used in prior committee meetings. The department prepares an overview narrative along with the 3-box report. As I look at your docket this evening, item number 1.
Larry,
Yes,
Larry,
yes.
check this, we're getting, I saw like, what's it called, back? Is there like another mic or a speaker or something next to your
Ask
speaker?
if everybody else could mute their phone.
Oh, all right, so Mr. Clerk said if everybody mutes their phones, mutes their side, then Mr. Mancini will be clearer for the record. So let's try that, okay? All right, Mr. Mancini?
I'm here. But Mr.
Great, why don't you,
Mr. Clerk, just so you know, I shut off my call to the phone. Mr. Clerk, should I call back in on the phone?
It probably will be clearer, but we can try to continue for now and then.
Give me one
see
quick
how-
second and I can get that done. I had it on phone for your benefit because you have reminded me about that, but give me a second.
ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID. You have joined the meeting as an attendee and will be muted throughout the meeting.
That doesn't sound good. Okay, can you hear me?
Sorry. I don't want to do tutorial during the meeting, but at the moment that you were going to enter, instead of pressing pound, you should have entered the participant ID that was on your screen. And so now you're connected twice. I don't know if you want to redo it again or just try to use your computer audio for now.
ID on the invitation. All right, I'm going to go live. I'm going to go without the phone. I'm doing my very best to speak clear and slow and distinct. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good evening. I did take my oath of office, testimony this evening, and Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, for the record. Mr. Chairman, the docket calls for item number 1, discussion relative to the future tax structure. I wasn't clear if you would like to have the assessor talk about how she worked to compile the tax levy that was submitted for your consideration. And if you prefer to do that first, as opposed to doing the overview of that department's budget, which is done in a format that has a narrative followed by the 3 bullets. At your request, Mr. Chairman, I'll take it in the order which you prefer.
yeah, no, let's go with number 2 first and have her go through her budget.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, in the case of the
Please.
number 101-207, this department is not a revenue generating department. As far as expenditures, the major review of the expenditures by category group are as follows. As far as salaries, total salaries for FY21 is $1,015,552. It's a decrease of $18,161 over the FY20 budget. The decrease is due to increased attrition as the city plans to delay posting certain vacancies and will not be filling non-essential positions in FY21. There is a request to fill, Mr. Chairman, a position that was approved last year by the council as an allowed position without funding, under the direction that the finance department, working with the assessor, if there was opportunity to find available funding, could employ that particular position. That position was known as a statistical analyst. The assessor, upon her arrival, working with other departments that affect the tax assessor role, particularly the Department of Inspection and Standards, had made observation that the position was best known as quality control. And the quality control, and I'll let her speak to that, comes from the building permit process as it makes its way over to the assessor's process, not only from the building permit issuance side, but also recording proper values in order to meet a timely levy based on those at December 31 of any given year. Finance saw fit to allow for that to move forward just prior to pre-COVID-19, with the understanding that there was enough savings within her office to do so, given that it was an allowed position, yet unfunded, and had indicated that it was going to be submitted in this new budget. And Mr. Chairman, this position, in of its nature, would not only ensure that proper reporting of values are being properly entered into the system from permitting and other activities at the Department of Inspection Standards, but it also would therefore be a revenue generator position to the city in that light. So that is under the consideration, and that is included in the budget submission. As the benefits of FY21 is an increase of $12,242 from the prior year budget. Services for this department, a decrease of $143,000 from the FY20 budget. This decrease is due to a revaluation related expenses and other outside consultants that were budgeted in the prior year that are no longer necessary in fiscal year 21. Supplies will remain at $4,500, and there are no capital expenses in this budget. That completes the narrative for the tax assessor, Mr. Chairman. Attached with that budget package is an organizational chart, which has been provided by the assessor, and the three box report, which are before me, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to go through that if there are no questions by you or the members of the committee.
Continue on, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, to refamiliarize both the committee and other members of the council that are present this evening, the three box report earned its name because the boxes to your left compare the prior year budget to the budget that's under submission, therefore budget 20 versus budget 21. The center boxes compare the current budget and what we project the budget will end at this year, basically looking at any variances or any differentiation. And then frankly, the boxes to the right compare that projected 20 budget to the proposed 21 budget to determine, did we omit, was there a risk factor that we should have reviewed, or was there something that's best in line? So starting with the 20 versus 21 budget to the left, you'll note from my narrative that there is a technical decrease in the salary line by $19,580. Longevity has a slight increase of $1,419. Throughout all the benefit columns, there's an increase of benefit amounts of $12,242. Much of that would be attributed to benefits associated with contributions to the labor's pension plan, FICA, and medical insurance, $18,925 increase in medical insurance. Postage has a decrease of $3,000. Dues and subscriptions has a decrease of $5,520, and printing has a decrease of $600. Following that forward, the contractual services, outside services, has been decreased by $133,000. Overall, this budget, the services decreases by $143,000. And if you can turn to the second page, which is marked as page 17, contingent office supplies, the total budget at this time for the assessor 21 versus 20 is a decrease of $149,000. We fully expect that. If you look to the center columns, we fully expect that the assessor's budget will come in at budget or slightly above, just based upon some projections with salaries. The salaries are currently looked at about $34,000 over budget. That would be with the projection of the position of quality control analyst being retained. And then there were other changes associated with that projection for FY20 versus budget 20 as you move down the column. The net difference is about a $9,000 projected over budget, but I think by the time the year is over and we see some additional savings, Mr. Chairman, that'll probably be budget neutral or below. As to the FY20 versus FY20 projected, those numbers appear for you on the right. And there are not many changes that would address a need for a change in the budget as they compare to the 21 budget versus what we project that the FY20 will end at. My presentation of the three box report. Also before you, Mr. Chairman, is attached is the job description for the quality control analyst. It appears as a salary at $820, and the job description is before you. And again, this was a position that was previously identified as a Statistical analyst, it was approved last year, but not funded. It is, in our opinion, in the best interest of the city and the Office of the Assessor, along with the related departments in government, to fill this position, as it will allow for, I think, revenue generation, as well as the quality of the work that would be associated with permits versus construction and versus tax assessment. That completes my presentation on this matter, and I'll take any questions or questions of the assessor.
Mr. Clerk's going to send you some additional instructions on the audio part of your presentation to work on your end. Meanwhile, committee members, do you have any questions
Not of
on
Larry,
this?
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Vice Chair?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Vice Chair, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mancini. I would just like to hear about the new position from the tax assessor. If perhaps she could walk us through the position, what she hopes to achieve with that spot. And I heard Mr. Mancini reference a few times a revenue generator. I'm interested in understanding that a little bit better. So it's just an explanation of that, but other than that, I don't have any questions for Larry.
Thank you. And I believe the Madam Assessor is available to give that discussion.
Thank you.
Ms. Parry?
Thank you. So that particular position, when I came into the assessor's office in September, I felt there was a great need for additional collaboration between both the assessor's office and the inspections and standards offices. As it currently stands, we have 3 appraisers in our office. Their work is very cyclical in that, when bills go out, they then spend the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months heavily, they're inundated in the appeals and just assisting with the board. So they don't really have their eyes out on the road. They're not out in the field reviewing the permits that were recently pulled. What happens is they don't start looking at permits that were pulled for the upcoming budget season until that budget season's upon us. They're closing everything out for year end. So they're looking at it sometimes 6, 7 months after the permit was initially pulled. I feel there's a great need to have somebody in the office who is reviewing permits that are pulled in live time. So when a certificate of occupancy is issued from the inspections department, I think our office should be also looking at that work and identifying the work that's been completed and the growth that we're seeing in our tax base. As it currently stands, once all of our appraisers are caught up on the appeals and the other work that they're responsible for, Janice and I, the deputy, are scrambling to identify, okay, what did we capture in new growth this year? It would be extremely helpful to the city as a whole to identify this growth as it occurs throughout the year. So my hopes is to have this position do this on a monthly basis so we can see the growth and capture the growth as it actually occurs. And with just collaborating with inspections and standards, I think it's important to see that, if we have just say 100 building permits that are pulled this week, and the cost associated with those permit fees or permits is just say $1 million. What are we gaining in assessment growth relative to that $1 million? So I want to build that collaboration between the 2 departments to identify growth as it occurs and also to make sure that it makes sense. If building permits are pulled for $1 million, are we seeing $2 million in assessment growth? And why is there such a discrepancy between the 2 numbers? So I just want to provide clarity going forward and a better understanding of our tax base as it occurs.
Thank you.
Vice Chair?
So you mentioned the permits and I know I recently had a conversation with our new Director of Inspections and Standards and our new DPW Director, and we talked about coordination of services, and there clearly is a struggle between all of the departments. And you mentioned, making sure the taxes are correct, but there's also other components of city services that kick in. And there really is a hole that I see in coordination of services between the tax assessor, the DIS as well as DPW. So I would just like to just stress the importance of trying to coordinate services with those departments for the benefit of the city of Providence on a whole host of topics, not just the assessor's role. So I asked those two departments to work together. Now I'm going to ask you as well to make sure that you're all coordinating relative to new projects coming on board to make sure that we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. I'm pretty good. I just wanted to take the opportunity to make that comment. I have no further questions at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ms. Carey, when you were putting your budget together, were you asked to put forth any types of cuts or changes in your budget?
We were looking at our budget as a whole. There were services that were included in the prior budget that me as the new assessor didn't feel were necessary. Some additional consulting funds. So you'll notice there was a decrease in that line item. So last year they had looked into pictometry, which is now utilized by both the assessor's office and planning department. Pictometry is an updated service where it's doing flyover pictures so you can see the status of a particular building at a certain point during the year. It's very helpful for our December 31st date. But that's a baseline package, which I thought was a fine expense at $3,000, whereas the prior budget included a plus, which is an expansive package that was exceeding, I think, $40,000 or $50,000. At this time, I don't think that's a necessity for the city. Therefore, I did not include it in this budget. That was a
Were those contracted services that you just mentioned? What did you use the money for? What did you use the money for then? For this present fiscal year?
In the current fiscal year, there was an RFP that went out prior to my arrival for some assistance with reviewing National Grid, I believe it was. So that was the bulk of the consultant cost last year.
So is that line 53425, contractual services and training, is that the line you're talking about?
Yes.
So you were budgeted $161,568 in this present budget. It looks like you spent $153,933, right?
In addition to the outside consultants, there was also vision appraisal. So the revaluation contract expanded over 2 fiscal years. So there were costs expended in both those years. So the balance of the reval, I believe, came out of there.
When will be the next time that you have to bring vision in or the appraisal company to do a reval?
It's every 3 years.
So when will be the next time? 3 years from now?
12/31/21.
Okay. All right. And that's so that number was added because you have to pay for vision for reval, right? Is that what you're saying?
I believe so, yes.
And so I'm going to defer if that's the case. And now that you don't have to pay vision, you're just looking to get $27,580, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's talk about the added position. So is your office the one that deals with the review of like the tax stabilization and all that stuff? Is there supposed to be a tax stabilization coordinator of some sort in there?
There was a TSA coordinator, I believe, out of the finance office. So we don't hold that position in our office. We certainly are involved with TSAs, but we don't have that position in our office.
Okay. And supposedly that position is being funded by the TSAs because in all the TSAs, they added a percentage point to pay for it, those expenses. So now let's look at your present organizational chart. Presently right now, is everybody working and actually doing something productive for the city of Providence in your organizational chart?
Presently, they're all employed, yes, by the city, with the exception of that quality control analyst. That position is not filled currently.
So I know they're employed. What I'm asking is this: for example, is the commercial appraiser? Are they actually working every day for the city of Providence?
Our commercial appraiser.
Are they teleworking?
Our commercial appraiser is working remotely. There are about 6 employees that are working remotely right now, keeping the assessor's office and its essential functions moving forward. The balance of
Okay, so
are not.
which one have you identified as your essential workers and which one you have identified as non-essential? Which one are your non-essential workers?
So if you're looking at that organizational structure chart, just starting from the top going down, both Janice and I have been working full-time each day. Senior clerk, Gloria Malero, she has not been working. The administrative aide, Dina Stone, has been working. The bilingual clerk, Lisette, has not. Certified appraiser, Michael Murphy, has not. Secretary to the BTAR has not. The motor vehicle appraiser has not. Our commercial appraiser, Bill Coyle, has been working. Our residential appraiser, James Drew, has not. Supervisor of real estate, Janice Montague, she has been working. Our cartographer, Lauren, has not. Our deed readers, Joseph and Prospero, have not. Our senior deed reader, Gary DeSaro, also has not been. Back over to the left side, supervisor of tangibles, Karen Scarcella, she has been working. And tangible appraiser, Tracy Scott, has been helping, she just started working for us this past week.
So at this time, now all those folks are at home getting paid full-time pay, but not working. Is that correct?
Yes, the other exception to this would be Gloria and Jay are both assisting with delivering lunches to students.
They're delivering lunches to students. Can you explain? So what you did is you transfer them out of your unit to go deliver lunches to students?
As needed, yeah. So I believe 2 days a week they're assisting with the delivery of lunches. We have some vehicles in our
How do you know that?
in coordination with the administration.
So who is making sure that, so just for the sake of conversation, majority of your staff right now is sitting home, getting paid, but not doing any productive work for the people of Providence. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
So-
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Joe, you can, yes, Mr. Mancini.
Ms. Perry has given testimony regarding the members of her work staff that are doing work from home. And many of the times that the work that her staff does requires work in the field. And much of that work occurs prior to levy certification, including recertification that is necessary before the budget is adopted. It may be impractical this time to send people out, particularly to make visits to properties where they may not have admission or they may not be able to get to a particular location. But I would think that in fairness, the critically named staff have been asked to do work. These are members of the bargaining unit. They've been working remotely. From what I know from Ms. Perry and Ms. Muscatelli, that they've done a very decent job, very good job in compiling the tax levy to get us the
Mr. Mancini,
with the budget.
Stop. I appreciate your hyperbole, but I'm not going to go down that road. The reality right now is the majority of staff is sitting home getting paid full payment and not producing anything for the people of Providence. That's fine. That was a policy decision by the administration that you guys chose to take on. Just accept your action, all right? So let's move on. So at this time, let's talk about, I'm trying to understand, I gather now, did anybody have an opportunity to read the journal today? If you did, there was a great article about, in the journal about lawmakers asked how they're gonna fix the $400 million present deficit in the present fiscal year. So I'm trying to understand the things they're talking about are all sorts of different things, all over the place from, layoffs to furloughs to stuff like that. So I'm trying to understand at this time, you haven't had this position ever, this quality control position at this point in time. So wouldn't it be prudent at this time to hold off on, since you told me it's in the present budget, you clearly, no one acted upon it, so we sat on it. Is it more prudent financially maybe to hold off on hiring anybody at this point in time and putting the city further in the hole? I understand the city has a different finances than the rest of the world, and they seem to be fine. but I'm just want to get understanding that, should we be now hiring? Can you live without, you lived without the quality control person at this point in time, is that correct, Madam Assessor?
That is accurate.
Right?
How-
So, you've been, so it's not something that's a position there that someone's been there for 20 years and actually they've been doing anything. Right now, this is would be a brand new created position with a brand new created job prospect and what you're gonna do and what not do, right? All right. I just
do
wanna make
feel
sure.
this- Yeah, this position was posted. I did want to move on it as soon as I came in as the assessor. It was posted prior to COVID-19 shutdown of City Hall. I do feel it's critical. It took some time in collaboration with the Inspections and Standards Department for both me and them to identify what the needs are of this position. Moving forward, it's something that, as Larry mentioned, not only revenue generating, but as a whole, I think the city more aware of the growth that's occurring in their city and be able to report on it more accurately. At any
Well, Madam Assessor, just like you've had some of your workers, sitting home, doing nothing, but getting paid full pay for the city of Providence, but then you transfer them to give out lunches for kids and students, it seems to me that maybe you can use some of your folks here, maybe they can do some of this work at this time. The question still comes down to, and I understand I'm the only one concerned about the finances at this time, about the city's finances, where we are, where we're going, and we all want to pretend everything's fine. The merits at this point in time, when we go at the highest unemployment rate in the nation, percentage-wise, that we are now going to do another job, when you actually have half your employees sitting home doing nothing and getting paid full time. It's really kind of a weird thing. So you want to put another person on, pay another person, who's then probably going to be sitting home for a little while longer. Who knows what's going to happen? So my feeling is, I think it's far more prudent to hold off on hiring anybody at this point in time. That's a more prudent financial measure, because you may have a problem down the road. So that's just my take on it. So I understand everybody's critical. I've heard it. In fact, even the people sitting home getting paid full time doing nothing are critical, right? We just heard that spiel. The reality is that you're asking for another position to be hire another person at a time when people are getting laid off every day. I don't know, it seems to me a little, insulting to at least the people in my neck of the woods, they're losing their jobs. So I just kind of have a concern about that. But so can we go back to this? Let's go to I guess the tax structure. Can you tell us right now the state of the city's tax structure, and then what did you perceive for the upcoming budget? Meaning there was any shifts, any movements, anything that we need to be aware of in tax structure? For example, tangibles. Right, you collect the tangible, I guess you do that tangible, right? You do the residential, you do the commercial, et cetera. Are you getting any notices from any type of businesses, et cetera, asking to reevaluate their value of their taxes now, saying COVID-19 or something like that, just to kind of, I know it's past due, but they may be now saying I can't necessarily afford it, or I don't know how it's going to look next year, the year after. Can you tell us what's happening in your world and what's happening in response to what's going on with this COVID-19? Any interaction, anything that's occurring between those two issues?
Sure.
Those two.
So
Larry's muted.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Before Ms. Parry answers those questions, I would like to remind the committee that it's the collector's office that would more likely have heard from constituents who have expressed concern about hardship or difficulty paying. I don't think anybody would yet to be notified until tax bills go out on valuations and assessments, but I will defer.
Mr. Mason, that's fair enough. I would just ask if the people can answer the question.
They can,
So, if the
but
answer-
better suited would be the collector.
I know. We will ask that same question of the collector too. I'm aware of it. As you know, we go through a methodical process here, which much to many people's chagrin. but I just want to get a sense of what's happening in the assessor's world. I might not have asked the question correctly, so Madam Assessor, could you please answer what is happening in your world and anything going on interacting with the COVID-19 with the assessor's office? Any constituents' concerns, complaints, et cetera? And if so, what are they? And, you know?
So the feedback we've received so far from constituents, we do have a few deadlines in our office where, exemptions have to be applied for by March 15th. The tangible business filings also have to be filed by March 15th. There were some questions and concerns about getting that submitted to our office in time. As you know, City Hall was effectively shut as of close of business on March 13th, which means the deadline for that March 15th was that following Monday. We've accommodated all of our constituents so far, in that if they had concerns or, they're having problems with getting to the DMV and renewing their registration to their new address, we're communicating directly with the DMV on their behalf to see that, if they changed their address already, to try and do as much as we can electronically to benefit and to accommodate the constituent. Other than that, we haven't had too many issues. As Larry mentioned, I do think it will be something that financial accommodations would be made through the collector's office. But overall, with applying for exemptions, their homestead or tangible filing, we've been coordinating with them directly.
And let's talk about tangible. You mentioned this time the tangible tax application, you said, is due March 15th?
Yes.
Or was due? And how did it go? Did you get the normal percentage of numbers in or less? Up, down, what?
We did, believe it or not, because the city was shut down on the 13th, most people already had their filings in the mail at that point, already dropped them off at City Hall. There were a few that came in after the fact, and obviously we still accepted them, accommodated them, and acknowledged their annual return.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do we have any other questions for the assessor? Councilwoman Anthony, but one second. Please unmute her on the top. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a follow-up question on for Ms. Perry on the quality control analyst. So I just want to be clear. I know you said the revenue generating aspect of the position, but are you saying that we're losing revenue because we don't have this position filled?
I believe so. I don't feel that all of the permitted work that takes place throughout the year is captured. The problem is when you look at the amount of permits that are pulled, whether it's plumbing, electrical, mechanical, I don't have eyes on it constantly throughout the year. So when my appraisers finish their, like I mentioned, their cyclical work and they get through their appeal process, they don't have eyes on every single project. The coordination and collaboration I hope to have with the Inspections and Standards Department would include this position being with Inspections and Standard every time a CO is issued. So that my office is out on a project and says, yes, it's 100% done, and it's going to generate, another $250,000. I don't want it being an afterthought, and as it currently stands, most of the permitted work tends to be an afterthought. So I want to make sure that there are eyes on a continuous daily basis looking at work that's been completed. Yes, I do feel it's a revenue loss right now because I do not feel all permits are getting the required attention from our office.
And just to follow up on that, and so you don't have anyone else in the department to do that job because your current people that could do that job are doing other jobs that are essential to the services of your department. So you really don't have anyone else that can do this job, correct?
I do not, and I know the majority of the staff is not working right now, but had this position been filled prior to the shutdown of City Hall, it absolutely would have been the second one to be considered essential at this point. So between me and my deputy, this position would be essential right at the top to make sure that work is being accounted for, that growth is being captured, and a clear understanding of what's happening in our city.
Thank you so much. I just don't think we're in the position as a city to turn away revenue or not collect as much money as we can, especially coming out of this crisis. So I think you've convinced me that that position is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I'm going to follow up because actually I'm not as convinced as Councilman Anthony. I'm not easily convinced like that. My question to you is, I need empirical, specific evidence that you're telling me that this person's somehow gonna increase our revenue percentage-wise. And I need empirical evidence telling me that we've been losing revenue. If that's the case, then for the past years, past terms, that the representations from that office has been showing you've been losing revenue left and right and no one addressed it. So are you telling me today on the record that the assessor's office has been losing revenue year after year after year because there hasn't been this new quality control analyst? Madam Assessor, is that what you're saying specifically? Because you've convinced Councilman Anthony, and that's pretty easy, but not easy to me. So can you please answer that question, please?
I would be happy to prepare
And
an
how much
analysis.
exactly revenue have we lost? How much revenue have we exactly lost? I want to know. Since you stated it.
No, I understand that. I'll be happy to prepare an analysis. But what I was looking at initially walking through the door is that the inspection and standard has X taken out in building permits. And what have we captured in my office as growth? With the standard market growth and revaluation changes, those are outside of growth of new improvements. There has been nobody in that office that has been tracking that information.
So you're saying that the fault is in inspection and standards office? They're not doing their job?
I'm not blaming any department. What I'm saying is there's a lack of collaboration between departments. And that's what I want to clarify.
Okay, so-
Identify that.
All right, so you're saying you need a quality control person for another department's job, right? Because the other department issues the permits, right? Who issues the permits? Does your department do?
The inspections.
No. So you want a quality control department person for another department. It's like saying Toyota wants a quality job person for Ford. So I'm trying to understand if there's a problem with the inspection and permit area and their quality control, then how come it's not been addressed? Now, you and Mr. Mancini represent there's an identified revenue loss that's been occurring, and you've convinced some of my colleagues of such. Where is that identified revenue loss? Where it is in your budget? Mr. Mancini, we want specifics. We don't want hyperbole. We want specific numbers. Revenue has been lost because there hasn't been a quality control analyst in the assessor's office.
So, Mr.
Do you
Chairman,
have those?
if you might permit me this evening, I don't have those specific information. I believe my testimony was that it would generate revenue. And where would that revenue be generated?
So, Mr. Mancini, tell me how is it going to generate revenue? How is us hiring a quality control analyst is going to generate revenue? That implies you're losing revenue, right?
Correct.
Or
That is correct. That is.
So then how much revenue?
If you would allow me to finish.
That there is a known lost revenue. What is that lost revenue?
Mr. Chairman, if you would allow me to put my testimony, we are learning that sometimes the permits are issued and not properly valued or not valued with accuracy or to the degree they should. If that's the case, when a permit is issued, the assessor's office has to work off the permit issuance, not the value that they would deem by sending out their own inspector or their own quality controllers. Working together collaboratively.
Who identifies the value, though?
The values are assigned upon application to the permit.
I know, but who puts the value to the permit? Is it the assessor's office?
Generally, Department of Inspection and Standards.
So then therefore, right, because we just went through this, right? Supposing
Right.
you got rid of that director, under some type of, I don't know, allegation, and now you have a new one. So and we just talked about how that new one, by the way, if this committee heard from that individual, how they're going to instill all new methodologies to make sure that the values of permits are done correctly, except supposedly, because then therefore you were losing revenue, hypothetically. So now you convinced us all to go along with this new department director. Are you now saying that department director doesn't have the capability to value those permits correctly? Because now you're telling me you need to hire a person in another department, right? And I understand for quality control of that director. The question is, are you now saying that director's not doing the job correctly either?
No, what I'm saying is now the director is getting the values and the permit applications in line. It would take the work of the assessor's office to coordinate those values from one system to the other, because there are different duties involved between permit issuance and assessing of values. And I think that.
So whose assessment of value is going to rule? Are you saying that the assessor now will have the ability to overrule the value of the permit given by the Department of Inspection and Standards? Is that what
I'll
you're
leave
saying?
that, I believe so, but I'll leave that to the assessor to answer that question.
Madam Assessor, do you have an authority now to overrule what the department assesses the value of the permit now? Is that what you're doing?
No, I'm not overriding anything that's reported on a permit. What I am doing is if you pull a building permit to add an addition to your house for $20,000, and I value that assessment, if I reassess that new addition, and it costs $50,000, my $50,000 assessment will stand. I have no jurisdiction to go back and reissue permit fees or anything like that.
Correct.
And how do you, so you're saying the issue permit for X, it gets built, then your folks, your person will go out, and not, people you already have, the existing, will go out and do another assessment and go verify if that person spent that amount of money on that new build. Is that what you're saying?
It's not so much verifying that they spent that amount of money, it's just verifying the cost associated. So what does that generate in comparison to the assessment of the property? So if you do all the work yourself, yes, it may only cost you $10,000, but what does that add to your market value? So that's something our is going to be looking at. And it's something to point out to inspections to say, hey, they only pulled a permit with a cost of $10,000 when all of our market studies say that should probably cost $25,000. So if
that person pulls a permit for $10,000 to do improvements to their home,
mm-hmm.
they do the $10,000. Then you guys will look at it and you'll say, hey, it added $20,000 worth of value to the home. You will then tell the building inspector, and the building inspector now has to go back to that person and get another value point and make the permit for $20,000, not for 10. Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe I have the jurisdiction to enforce that, no. But in my office, I just want to make sure that we're accounting for all of the work that's being pulled in permits and we're valuing it appropriately.
So are you doing that now?
No.
So was it ever done?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So then is it based on what we just went through with the new changing of the guard in the department over there in building inspection where there was an allegation of the values of the permits?
I'm not aware of those allegations. I don't know the details of those allegations. From my point of view, it needs to be a collaboration between offices to understand the work that's getting completed to identify the growth that's occurring in the city, regardless of who's in the position.
So,
I just want to better understand.
What is your role? Is your role still going to go back to the director there and tell them to issue an additional permit with additional value, or is your role what's the end game that you would end up achieving on your end?
The end game is to make sure that all building permits are accounted for and assessed appropriately.
So, who does the assessment? Do they make the assessment, or you make the assessment?
We always make the assessment. We always have made the assessment.
All right. So you've been doing the assessment all along then?
Mm-hmm.
That's contrary to what you just stated. So you have been doing those assessments?
We always assess property that occurs. We always assess the property that's physically located in the city.
Okay. So then what does it matter if the building permit is $10,000 or $20,000? When you go and do your new assessment, that's what you do, right? Right? When you go do your assessment, you're just going to do your assessments like you normally do anyway.
We do, but shouldn't we have a better understanding of our data? Shouldn't we have a better understanding of the work that's getting completed in our city? If you ask inspections department, how much in single family homes, how much growth in single family homes are there? Why do they say $1 million and why do we say 1.5? Our department should be collaborating and talking together to have an understanding of what's actually occurring in our market. And right now,
but is it the building department, the buildings department, Department of Inspection, is it their job to know about the new assessment, what's going on out there? Their job is just simply someone wants to add an addition to the home or make a new building or whatever it is, and they put a value to that, and they get a building permit for that. Your job is to now do an assessment of that. So they may say there was $1 million worth of new work done, but your role is totally different. Your role is to say, well, that $1 million transfers into $1.5 million of new assessments. Not the right. It's not you see all those home shows. They say, we'll put $25,000 into this house, and now the new value of the house is, another $10,000, $50,000 more, right?
Right.
So you both have two distinct different roles.
We do.
So your job Your job is that when he gives the permit, you get the permit, and then when the building's done, you're gonna go and reassess it. That's what you're telling me, right? That's what you do now, right? Right? So then what purpose does that serve? Whether that person if that person put $10,000 worth of work into it and did all the sweat equity themselves, but then of course on the outcome, then my new assessment of my house is another $50,000, that's where you come in, because you go and do a reassessment. So then why do you need that position? You're just gonna do that job what you're doing now. You're doing that now as we speak. Whether $1 million gets put in for new permits and a new 1.5 in assessment, both departments are doing what they're supposed to be doing, right?
As it currently stands, again, in addition to all the things we talked about of looking at the permitted costs versus the assessment costs and things, there are also, my appraisers are not out on the field in live time looking at this work. So for instance, if someone pulls a building permit, just say a person pulls a building permit for $5,000 to replace some windows.
Yep.
If someone in my office was reviewing that building permit for new windows in live time, could go out there and identify that, hey, they're also doing a roof right now, or they're also doing new siding on their house, but they only pulled one building permit for $10,000. So what's happening currently in my office is my appraisers are not seeing that work until later in the year when it's completed. So they don't see it in live time. So really, we could have captured revenue from new windows, new siding, new roof, but the building permit was only pulled for one of those three items. So again, it's not to say that the building department is doing something wrong or erroneously or anything like that, but there's fault in the applicants for these building permits as well, where they're underreported costs or they're just pulling one permit where they should be pulling 3 permits. But I just think it's important to have our eyes out on the road on a daily basis, looking at the work as it's occurring. And that's another thing this position is going to fill.
That was a great example. I like that example. So someone puts in a building permit to say that, right? Then how will your office find out that they did a new roof and did some new doors? Is this person now going to go out and do inspections, field inspections? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
and they're going to confirm? So if there's 100 buildings, this person's going to be doing an additional field inspection, right? Now I have a question for you. Does the building department do a field inspection when the permit's issued? The answer is yes, isn't it? They do, right? That's why they have building inspectors. And when just hear me out. What I know is when someone in my neighborhood has to do a new roof, they got to go get a permit. They got to pay a value for it. And then later on, the building inspector shows up to see what they did. And then if the person did a roof, windows, and new doors, the building inspector said, hold it. You did A, B, and C. That's the building inspector's job. Now, what you're telling me is that what you want this person to do. So the question now comes back to the building inspector department. Are we saying the building inspector department's not doing that job? Because it sounds like if you need an inspector or they need more inspection help, it's probably in that division. Because the way it goes is the permit gets issued from them. Then when the job is, they're then supposed to go inspect the job. Hence, building inspector. Hence, if they did more work, like you said, Madam Assessor, in your example, the building inspector would have seen that and then would bring that to their attention and then would have to get an additional inspection and pay another permit, another fee. And then your office would see A and B. And then when your office comes around the corner to do a Revell, your Revell company will see all that stuff.
My issue is, I don't want to wait 3 years for my Revell company to find it. I want to have eyes from my office seeing it. I don't want to wait for the inspections department to tell me the applicant pulled the wrong permit.
So what you're saying is you don't believe in the truth and veracity of the building inspector's permit, because that's their job. That's their job. Their job is to go there and confirm that the work was done. Are you saying that's not happening? Because your one person isn't going to solve it if that's truly not happening. We need to get to the real crux of the problem. What you're implying is that the building department's not doing that job, inspection department's not doing that job, and they're not getting all the real-time information to your office so you can do proper assessment. So instead of trying to fix it there, we're going to hire one person over here who's not only going to do that, this person is going to be on the road all day long and all night long, on the amount of building permits issued, right? And all the other stuff you want this person to do, they're gonna go do that? Meanwhile, the building department still missed out on what?
The fees.
If the other fees, which is fine, you got the new assessment, but the building department, from your perspective, didn't go out there and get the fact that they did a roof and doors and other addition. So the real question is, does the building department inspection, Department of Building Inspection, does it have a inspection problem? If it does, then we should address the inspection problem there. Councilman Taylor.
Quick question. This position, actually a couple of questions. This position was budgeted last time, correct? As the statistical analyst assessor? Was that going to be it?
Yes.
2000.
Madam Assessor?
Was that?
It was a statistical analyst position.
Okay, but it wasn't
So
filled.
it's just, yeah.
Well, that last year it was listed as statistical analyst assessor. This year it's quality control analyst, but reading it, it looks like the same position. Is that correct?
Madam Assessor.
That is correct. It was approved last year, but from my understanding, was not funded last year.
Okay, why wasn't it funded last year? I guess my first question is.
So the previous assessor had asked that if we could consider creating a position to do statistical analysis based upon appraisals and evaluations. And while we thought that would be important at the time, we indicated that we could not provide funding for it, but we would create the position. And if opportunity presented itself during the budget year where there was savings and they could demonstrate further the value of that position, we would take it. When Ms. Perry was appointed, she began to do a top-down review of methodologies, and she arrived just prior to the budget season that this position, statistical analyst, will be better served to act as coordination of building permits vis-a-vis assessor and assessor tax levy. When she presented it to the finance department, it made sense independent of anything that was going on at the Department of Inspection Standards, and we felt that maybe there were missed opportunities, maybe there were values that needed to be supported more closely by people who work in the building trade, who work in that knowledge in her office. So with that said, we put the position in the budget.
Well, who took it out last time?
It wasn't taken out, Councilman. It was in with the understanding that we were not going to fund it. The position was created last budget with the understanding that we created it, but we did not fund it. We had an understanding that during the course of the fiscal year, with further documentation and demonstration of responsibilities, and if we could find savings in the assessor's budget, we would consider posting for the job and filling it sometime during the fiscal year. On Ms. Parry's appointment, she doing a review of her office positions, she decided best that that position would not be as important and therefore not necessary as one that she's testifying to this evening by having a changed title to quality control analyst.
But most of the duties are the same. So that person is reporting to the city assessor and collaborating with Department of Inspection Standards. So I don't understand the difference between last year's listing or posting and then this year's. I mean, and the other part is, if there was a problem, why didn't she bring that up? Because that position was there within the half year. Why didn't she bring it up during the year and say, listen, I need this position. It was taken out because we couldn't find what we're losing money. Now we're here that we're losing money.
Well, the position of statistical analyst was the request of the former assessor. It was newly created in the current year budget. But we didn't realize at the time when the position was asked for, it was late in the budget season. And we said as an accommodation, we'll create it, but we're not going to be able to fund it unless there's opportunity during the year to do so. The intention of the statistical analyst was to do just that, to do analytical work associated with appraisals and tax levy. Ms. Parry had a different vision that it would be better suited if that position, including its current duties, would add the responsibility of quality control, working predominantly with building values associated with Department of Inspection Standards. And to her credit, I think that's fair. So we agreed that we would let her post the position with the change in title, and a change in some of those responsibilities, and identifying savings in the half year. And this happened just prior to the city of Providence closing due to COVID-19. The understanding further was that the job would be included in the FY21 budget.
Okay, but also we have a new director of planning, inspection and standards. And one of the main things when he came on was one of the biggest issues was a lot of developers were complaining because because we got several letters not to appoint him at the time. And he actually explained it to the committee and actually explained it to the developers. And what happened was, I guess before, and this is, I'm only hearsay what he told us, is that things were kind of like all over the place, where now he's going by whatever the Rhode Island book says for whatever permit it is. If it's a roof, the permit's 5,000. I'm just throwing numbers. I don't know what it is. But if it's a roof, it's 5,000, or it's per money per 1,000. And it seems to me like he's got it more under control and going by something instead of just guessing. My opinion is I would want to wait on this position and see how this new director does, because really this position is only it should fall under the inspection and standards, not the assessor, because that's the question. That's the questions that we have, is whether we're charging enough. And according to what he said, he's got a book and that's what they go by, where before they weren't going by the book. So I'd like to see within a year's time what that budget brings in, see the difference and compare it to how many building permits and stuff were pulled. I think that makes more sense than just creating a position to overlook his, and he's a brand new director. And, like I said, I'd like to see how his works out.
So if I may, Chairman Revell, to respond, that's a very good point. In fact, the reason why it's a good point is because Ms. Parry was instrumental in working with Director Achute in developing that standard, in developing a daily contact associated with permit issuance, construction progress, certificate of occupancy issuance, addition to the assessor's role. What she was explaining really was that process always had a lag. And it may not have been intentional, and there may not have been anything wrong with it, but that lag sometimes did not match up with proper values. And if there was a miss in that lag, or that value was not properly entered in any given year, then there was a loss of revenue. So while I won't dispute the fact that does it belong in assessor or does it belong in inspection standards, I don't think what I won't dispute is that there's probably a need for someone who has real estate construction, real estate value knowledge to work upon permit issuance and prior to being entered to the assessor's role. She did say that person would probably be highly assigned to DIS. I think genuinely in her best interest, she was seeing it as a best practice for the city overall not to lose revenue. And not tax revenue, building fees as well.
Mr. Chairman?
Assessor, and then the internal audit, and then Councilman Anthony. Assessor?
So just to clarify, this position isn't so much quality control on the work that's being done or permits that's being pulled in the inspection and standard office, but currently in my office, because we do not have eyes on this work that's being completed at the time, what's happening is my appraisers, when they do have time available, they're all going out at the end and rushing and saying, okay, we generated $12 million in new assessment. The issue we're having is, where is the quality control within my office? So if reported cost that's coming out of Viewpoint, which is now electronically through the system, we take data from one system, dump it into our system. If the data that's coming over to us and my appraisers are saying, hey, this is the value, I don't have anyone overseeing that. And that's the point of this quality control analyst, is to identify the work that's being completed, what it's generating. I think it's important for the assessor's office to be able to say, hey, we saw a 40% growth in residential properties in this particular neighborhood. When we look at this reval that just occurred, did anyone predict that some neighborhoods would see a 50-60% increase? No, because there's no quality control in my office to tell you that's what the market's been doing for the past 3 years. Instead, we wait for a reval and then we all panic. My concern is that I want to be able to report on a quarterly basis. This is what we're seeing in the market. This is what we're seeing in growth. I think it's fair to not only the city, but our constituents to know what's occurring in the market. That's the quality control I need to take place in my office. Again, it's not to say, I want to collaborate with the inspections and standards. That's a big point of this position. But in summary, I mean, we shouldn't wait until a reval to capture growth. We shouldn't wait until a reval to say, hey, we missed this, let me pick it up now. I want eyes from my office. Our functions are separate and aside from inspections and standards. Just like they have inspectors, I have a need for an inspector. That's it.
And the internal auditor, Councilwoman Anthony, then Councilwoman Ryan. Internal auditor?
Hi, I just have concern about a comment that Larry said. This position was unfunded. You said you found savings in this year's budget. How can you say you found savings in this year's budget when you wiped out the deficit reduction?
That was when the job was posted, sometime at the end of February. COVID-19 had not occurred. City government was not closed. My remarks were saying that when the assessor identified the need, she asked permission to change the title. We went through the HR department, and we were satisfied that she had demonstrated sufficient ability to utilize this position in a different capacity, and it was posted. The job hasn't been filled, but at that time, there was sufficient savings.
Okay, and another question, and forgive me, this may be directed at.
Would include it in the new budget.
Okay, this may be directed at the assessor, and I honestly don't know. There are two other real estate assessors in your budget. Is it something that they can do? I'm not sure what they do, so just curious.
Are you talking about the other appraisers in the budget?
I'm sorry, yes.
It's something they train to do. It's not included in their union job descriptions as it currently stands. With significant training, I do think it's something that they could do. The original title of the position was statistical analyst. Because a big part of the position, the need that I feel is we should be reporting on growth as it's occurring in different neighborhoods and wards. So there's definitely a technological component to the position that I don't believe they have the skill set for. But with training, perhaps, yes. But ideally, someone who has experience with the viewpoint database, that inspections and standards using that database to capture data and roll it into our camera database. So I really want someone who has a skill set that covers both those areas. And right now, our appraisers do not have that.
Councilwoman Anthony?
Okay, thank you.
I have I'm just not sure. So if you capture the increased value after someone pulls a building permit and renovates their home or whatever they're doing, and the value of the property is the assessed value, you want to make sure you capture that as soon as possible. Do you have to wait till the reval is done to increase the assessed valuation?
You do not, no. So if a building permit has been pulled or significant improvements have been made to the property, you have the right to assess that property. You don't have to wait until revaluation.
That's just where we should be. I mean, gosh, if we are waiting, and don't have someone on the ground to do it right away so that we can capture the increased assessed value and tax them more for their property tax, instead of waiting 3 years for the next, or whenever we get around to it, because we don't have the right person or the capacity within the department, we are for sure losing revenue and property taxes. So we're not just talking about fees, building fees, we're talking about losing property taxes because we're not currently right on the spot increasing the valuation of the properties. So, I mean, my gosh, that must be a lot of revenue.
Right.
That's a great question, Councilman. Assessor, are you saying that's not happening at all right now? That is not happening in the city of Providence? That's a great question, Councilman. Are you saying, with the scenario that Councilwoman Anthony just stated, are you saying that at this time, the city of Providence, the assessor's office does not do updated assessments on people's homes all year round?
We are doing updated assessments. It's not happening year round, and it's not happening with quality control in place. That's the problem.
No, listen, don't put the quote. Let's answer the question, yes or no. Is your office capturing the new assessed values, yes or no, on year round, yes or no?
All properties, no.
Okay, how many properties are you doing a year?
We went out this year on about 5,000 building permits.
So who went out and did that work?
The 3 appraisers.
So you had, the 3 appraisers went out and they went out and did that work. And what exactly did they verify what the building permit said, or what did they do?
They looked to see what the building permit.
What triggered them to go out? The building permit, or they just go out randomly?
Nope, the building permit triggers it.
Right. So they did 5,000, the 3 appraisers?
That's just it, because there's 3 of them and they're doing it 6-7 months after the permit was pulled. If it was just for a roof, they're not going out to look at it. They don't have the time to.
No, your answer is, you hire this one person, they're gonna solve that problem. They're gonna go out immediately. They're gonna go out that next day, and they're gonna be out there every day doing 5,000 permits. By the way, reviewing 5,000 permits a year for one person is an awful lot. And then doing a whole new statistical review. Right? So right now you have 3 people doing it, and you're saying they're not doing it, right? They're not getting the job done. You believe this one person now will be the key to the whole success of your model. Is that what you're saying?
It's going to be a key
That's
to
what
the
you're saying.
component. Yes, it's going to be a key to change in the office.
So because this is interesting. Originally, you were so adamant about they're gonna be going out there doing inspections. But then when you do read the job description, nowhere at all does it say they go out and do inspections or go out and do that work. So you need to make sure that person knows that they're gonna be out every day. Because think about it now, 5,000 inspections for one person a year. That's just the ones you say you're doing. That's an awful lot of work.
It's not to say this person is going to be solely responsible for the 5,000. I still have 3 appraisers.
Because you got 3 other people, right?
The purpose
You have
of
3
this
other people, don't
position,
you?
this purpose of the position is to provide quality control of all the work that is done. So if
No, just so you know,
I would
nowhere
say-
in your job description is quality control. It just says the title. Everything else is a standard statistical analyst. But Councilman Ryan has some questions, and then we'll go from there. Councilman Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My hand's been up quite a long time.
Sorry, that's on me.
No, that's okay. Am I, just for logistics here, is raising my hand on the participant tab adequate to get your attention, or should I wave in front of the camera? What is your preferred
Good
form?
question.
The clerk helps me,
I'm
so you can wait.
genuinely asking, can you see my hand up on?
Now I can. I didn't.
Oh, awesome. Okay, good. No, I just wanted to know, but I was sitting here quite patiently. I did notice, I've been looking at the QC analyst position, and it's interesting to me in that everywhere it is referred as a statistical analyst, it's referenced as a statistical analyst. Only in the title does it say quality control analyst. There's also item 4 under duties and responsibilities. The number is listed, but there's no duties next to that. Is that just a typo? Was something intended to go there and was missed? My first question.
So to answer your first question, looking at the job description now, so the reason that the title position at the top says quality control and then the summary says statistical analyst, as mentioned, this was posted prior to COVID-19 down at City Hall, and the approved title at that time was statistical analyst. So this particular job description was what was used on the post. The HR department did change it from quality control to statistical analyst when it was posted, because that was the approved title at the time. So that was it. And then I think the number 4 was just a typo. Looking at my working document, there's nothing there as well. So it's just a typo.
Okay, so this was posted as quality control analyst or statistical analyst? You said
Statistical analyst.
Statistical analyst, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, just kind of a little technical thing. I remember talking about this, and I enjoyed listening to my colleague, Chief Taylor, talk about it in the past. We did speak of it last year, and we were intrigued by it and saw some value in keeping an eye on statistical values throughout the year, as opposed to, getting them all hit us at one time in a reval year. And obviously that last reval year was a hurricane. People like to refer to financial conditions of the city as a category 5 hurricane. Well, that was quite a shock to our residents and our taxpayers. So I do see some value in that. However, I don't see justification in hiring this person. Our finances are going to be extremely strapped this year. And I think that the council is charged with looking at this budget very, very closely to find savings in every location that we can. I don't see justification for this. When I started talking this evening, I mentioned or I made a comment about the importance of collaboration or coordination of services between departments, particularly as it relates to permitting. I noticed there's a disconnect. But I'm not convinced that it's a person that needs another person, because keep in mind, we have someone in the permitting department evaluating that improvement to the house or whatever. And then we have an inspector from DIS that goes out, makes sure that the work is complete. In some instances, we have DPW work if that is appropriate, depending on the level of the construction work. They have an inspector. If it's a commercial business, there's a board of licensing inspector. We have all these inspectors that we're paying, they're going out. And I asked a simple question, we've got three inspectors going out. Did any one of them happen to mention, did they see a certain thing? This was just a particular incident that happened to me recently. And they said no, because they don't look for that. Well, the reality is we need to figure out, we need a comprehensive collaborative approach when we're sending people out on the road to the best of their ability to make sure that we have internal controls that, raise a flag in your department. And then are followed up by other folks, obviously. So, I think last year when the statistical analysis position was raised, it was about, to me at least, I can't speak for my colleagues, it was about determining fairness in the evaluation of our properties. But I believe is, what you have presented today in testimony, this year's focus seems to about how do we chase revenue. And I'm not on that, I'm not on board there because I think that we can be more efficient in our process by working on coordinating services, collaborating, being more efficient in our operation. And I would like to see more effort and emphasis in your department on getting our evaluation representatives in, on a regular basis. I do think, I heard you say that you wanted to do quarterly reporting. I think that that's an excellent idea. I think as an administrator, I think you're focused right on the money. And I think that having the appropriate internal controls from DIS, which is the pressure point, or that's the point of control or pivot, if you will, that it should get that permit on your radar to ask further questions if necessary. So I'm in the school of thought that I don't think we've justified this position. I think that we can manage through it by putting in internal controls in appropriate places and working on collaboration and coordination of services through the departments. Those are my thoughts, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you. I would just want to follow up. You mentioned there was about 5,000 new assessments done by your team of 3. And I was wondering, out of the 5,000, did they, what's been there, what has it been seeing that the fact that the building inspector's reports are wrong? And if so, what's the percentage of that? Madam Assessor.
I don't have a set percentage, but there's definitely permits that are missed. I wish I could say otherwise, but coming in, I mean, we've identified buildings that were brand new construction that was missed off the tax roll. Again, we have 3 appraisers that are reviewing work when their time permits. Their sole responsibility is not just reviewing building permits, it's a small portion of their job. And my hopes with this position is to have somebody responsible and acknowledging the work that's being completed on an annual basis, 12 months of the year, not 4 months of the year.
So at this time, you said about 5,000 building permits to get issued. Your team goes out and looks at them. That comes out to about, let's say 260 days of the year. So they got to do 20 of those inspection permits a day, right? So your 3 inspectors do those 20 inspections a day. Is that correct?
They should be, but no, there's not enough time for them to do that.
Well, you got a couple of choices. One, either you take the permit that the Department of Building Inspection gave you, and you take that face value, right? Okay. And you say, okay, that's a new value to that home, blank, it's X. Then the next step is one of your 3 inspectors or analysts goes out to that site and takes a look at it. So out of that, can you tell me, out of the 5,000 inspections you mentioned, you said in your testimony, how many of those 5,000 specifically, if you don't, I'd like to have it for tomorrow night's meeting, how many did your people went out to? How many did they see differences, meaning they saw it was a $10,000 permit for windows, and they found out they did windows, doors, roofs, and an addition. So, because you also testified there's this thing occurring too, which is one, you're not capturing all the, I guess, real-time new assessment, and number 2, you're not necessarily getting the true value of the new improvements of it because it's not being fully stated on the permit. So let's start with the second piece first, which is, so how many have you uncovered or discovered out of your inspections or your appraisals in this past year or the past months you've been in charge, whatever it's been, and how many have they found that that's the case? Do you have that number to prove out that's your major premise, so I need proof to prove out your major premise. Because that means we have to talk to the building inspection. When they come in, we need to let them know that something's happening there, right? Because if you're telling me your team's proving out that they're not capturing the new values or the building permit's not capturing the new build, then when the Department of Building Inspection comes before this committee for budget hearings, that's going to be something we're going to talk about. So do you have that percentages and how many times your team finds that out? And you just mentioned you find out that there's houses that are being built with no building permits, I think you said, and your team found it all on its own accord?
No.
Please explain.
Nope. So what I'm saying is there have been building permits pulled. That's not the problem. Again, the point of this position is not for oversight of their work in their department. It's to work with them to understand what's getting pulled and then how we're capturing the revenue. It's not to point fingers and say they're doing something incorrectly or they're not doing their job or my people aren't doing their job. It's right now.
Well, I know. You said there's a couple of analyses. One issue is you're not necessarily getting the real-time new value of the house on the record, on the tax rolls right now. Someone does there's so many building permits, someone does a $1 million addition to their house. By the time your team finds out maybe a year later, or the Revell gets it, right? And you want to get ahead of that. Now, that's a valid issue, okay? But the second piece, you led off with this first. You led off with inspections and permitting and the undervaluation of that. This was your example was they're doing windows, instead they were doing windows and a roof, right? So I want to know the second piece to actually it was the first part of your testimony, but the second piece now, because what happens now after this conversation, everybody's kind of repositioned this conversation to figure out how to win the day. And I appreciate what you guys are doing, because that's what advocates do. Which now you realize that what you came out with isn't the best argument. So now you're doing the next argument. So I still want to flesh out this one, which is how many times have your team found out that their permit and what was permitted didn't equal to what the work was done? You testified that occurs, and you testified beginning this person was going to be rooting out that stuff. And that's when we got into the inspection conversation. So do you have the percentage of that?
I do not have the percentage readily available now. I do not have that.
Yeah, so for tomorrow, Mr. Mancini, can you please have the Madam Assessor present that information? You must have it because you guys made that part of your passionate speech why this person had to be here. That was the primary mission. Now you punted to the second piece, right? Which has a little more, it's more tactile. It's more applicable to the conversation. All right. So if you could get that, we'd like to see that because that means we need to talk to the Department of Building Inspection to find out what they're doing. Because if you're finding a problem, then we should make sure they know you are. So we need that information if we could. All right? So, do you want any other, you want to go on to the, anything else at this time? We're going to move on to the collector and then we'll follow back. All right?
Oh, we're
Ms.
good.
Mancini, do you want
Mr.
the box?
Mr. Chair?
No,
Madam Internal,
my only point is,
Madam Internal, then Mr. Mancini.
Mr. Chair, part of the reason the assessor also, in case anyone wanted more clarification on the breakout of the TSAs, I don't know if you want to discuss that now, or if you guys are all set with that.
Say it again?
A breakout of the TSAs and how the structure was redone this year. That was part of
Okay,
the
yeah.
question from last week. I don't know if that's something you want to address tonight.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. I think the Madam President was concerned about that, had a question about that in particular. So, Madam Assessor, could you give us a little more enlightenment on the breaking out of the TSA? It looks like what was presented was originally the TSA, the tax that we're collecting the TSA was part of the total tax revenue, and I guess now it's broken out into a separate bracket. Is that right? No, is that right, Mr. Mancini? It's broken out a separate bracket now?
it is shown separate. That's correct.
Right. So, Madam Assessor, can you explain why it was like that before, and why is it now being proposed to be changed? I think that was the question, and Madam President can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was the crux of one of the crux of her concerns. So, Madam Assessor, could you please answer that question?
Sure. So this year with the proposed budget, I noticed that there were some TSAs that were within the tax levy and then other TSAs that were included in a separate line item within the budget. With a large tax agreement that was expiring this year, once there's no longer a tax agreement, it has to be put back on the levy because there's no agreement in place. I've always been under the impression that if you have a tax treaty in place, it's a known to the finance department, to the assessor's office, and it's agreement outside of what's your levy. So anything that, to me, that has an active agreement should be captured in a separate line item off the levy. As the agreements expire, those projects come back onto the levy. It's better for clarity and just tracking of the agreements moving forward. So each budget year, you know how much you're getting from TSAs, what projects are included in those TSAs. And as you add more TSAs on, it would grow. As they fall off and expire, they go back on the levy.
Madam Secretary, is there a difference between a tax treaty and a tax stabilization agreement?
Both are, it's an agreement between the taxes. So a treaty could effectively be a tax stabilization agreement and a TSA could be a tax treaty. They're used interchangeably, to be honest with you.
Okay, I just want to make, City Solicitor Chevron, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Is a tax treaty and a tax stabilization the same, are they interchangeable? Are they the same exact kind of, I guess, legal animal or legal relationship?
I think they're different in that the requirements of them, but I think generally it's an agreement, a general agreement. I mean, I can give you let me look at few before the next meeting to give you an exact definition to see if there's an ordinance that addresses the definition. But I think conceptually they're the same. They're an agreement regarding taxes.
Okay. So now was the tax treaty for Manchester, I know that's no longer, I guess, was that in response to a lawsuit, or was that what was that in response to?
I don't know. I don't have a history of the Manchester Street power plant.
All right. Okay. Madam President, do you want to have some questions on this item? I'm sure.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. So the question, thank you. The question I have is, why in prior years we were not capturing that information in a separate line, and this year we're doing it? So what I want to know is, we were making a mistake by not having them on a separate line all along. And what does that mean? Were opportunities in which it looked like we were going over the cap because we were counting the TSA with the other taxes? So I don't know if you have that information.
conversations on municipal finance, there's no law requiring a tax treaty to be on or off the levy. For accounting purposes and just for clarity, I like having them off the levy. In past years, yes, those TSAs, those administrative TSAs, for example, like the Biltmore, the arcade that were previously approved, those were on your levy and going towards your cap. Looking back over the past 3 to 5 years, we didn't exceed the cap in any of those years. And I think we kind of came close, but we didn't have the need to exceed the cap because of the TSAs. So I don't think it was a problem. I think for this particular year, when we had such a large one expiring, our levy cap, I think the total of it would be a $14 million growth. This particular TSA, I mean, it wasn't going to cover $14 million worth of growth, but it was going to absorb a big chunk of the cap. To me, it was a perfect year to make sure that we clean these up moving forward, so that we take these TSAs, we take them off the levy, and as they expire, which is in a phased out schedule, they go back on the cap. They're not millions and millions of dollars each TSA, so it's not going to have the impact on the cap. I don't think it'll be an issue with the 4% cap. But for me, it was more so for clarity moving forward to easily identify the TSAs in the budget for all parties involved.
Mr. Chair, I just want to rephrase my question. So what I'm thinking is, were there years in which we were counting those TSAs as part of the levy, in which probably we would have had more revenues available to the city if we were counting the TSAs in a separate line?
We can ask fine. I don't know how close we came to the cap in prior years, so I don't think there was a revenue loss there now. If we came right to the 4% cap, I'd say potentially there could be a slight loss, but I don't believe so now. And maybe Larry can answer that better.
So, Madam President,
Mancini?
Madam President, Mr. Chairman, I think I gave testimony last Thursday, and I think I amplified it thereafter. I'm not aware of any time in the past 5 or 6 years that there was a risk of losing revenue by going over the cap. The levy process, that budget process, begins as early as the beginning of the year based on values at December 31st. And then we continue to assess even after the budget articles are submitted at the proposed budget. I believe when the Dominion agreement was being negotiated, that was during the period between proposed and adopted budget. That might have been the only time when there was discussion that maybe or maybe not there would have been a concern about going over the cap. As it turns out, during that period, as I recall, we didn't have a problem with the cap. It was basically an agreement that was in our best interest. It increased the revenue significantly, and it got us into a 4-year period. So I don't have any evidence to show that there was any risk of us going over the cap in the past 5 or 6 years.
Can I take Mr. Mancini and it's Madam Assessor? In the present budget, we have the Manchester Power as a separate line item, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And in the present budget, but yet all the other TSAs are in the same line item as a tax revenue, correct? Is that correct? I think they're muted, Mr. I don't know, Mr. Mancini, Madam Assessor, is that correct?
So looking at page 6 of the budget book, we have the tax at the top, the state aid revenues, but between those two items, the tax stabilization agreements. The prior year was budgeted 0. We did not separate them, and this year we have the 13.1 million. The further detail, I think you're talking about Manchester. If you go to page or page 10 of the electronic document.
Same page.
Correct. But so for the present budget, in the present budget, is Manchester and the tax stabilization treated the same way?
No,
in the present budget. Manchester is taken out, right?
That's correct.
Right. So now, Mr. Cheverini, there's been testimony that the tax treaty and the tax stabilization, all intents and purposes, the same item. So the question is why, why did we ever differentiate between Manchester and the TSAs to begin with then? If your testimony, Madam Assessor, Mr. Mancini, is they're both basically the same thing, then why did we ever differentiate to begin with?
I think to your point earlier, I think because a tax treaty would be something where you would resolve the years of either double taxation or overtaxation, where a tax stabilization agreement may not have been the result of or the impetus from litigation or a disagreement over taxes, either litigation or the appeal process. And you resolved a number of years. The stabilization agreement is the taxes are stabilized for a period of time. So I think that may be the distinction, Mr. Chair.
Because Mr. Cheverini, I know you've been in my numerous finance meetings, because there would be passionate plea by administrations why Manchester should be distinguished in the budget for all those years, and said it was a different type of legal instrument. So I'm glad you helped and glean some information, because there was so much oodles of testimony in this before this committee on why it was different and why it should be treated different, the Manchester and the other TS. So I just want to make sure, and I know a lot of my colleagues haven't been on for a long time, but that is why it creates this kind of anomaly. So, Mr. Mancini, do you want to
I do, Mr. Chairman. So I think the treaty earns its nomenclature, as Mr. Cheverini had said, from some sort of settlement predicated on some reasonable standard versus a stabilization by its very nature, particularly those that have been done in the past 2 terms, maybe the past 8 years, where there is a stabilized graduated payment based on a reduction in value that would grow to full value. If you all back to the history of the Manchester Street Station, that occurred 19 years ago. And at that time, there was dispute between a tangible tax and real estate tax. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chairman, while I wasn't in finance then, I do have some recollection of how that was resolved. The then assessor made a determination that while there was not a distinct tangible and real estate rate, consent, there was an agreement that they would come to a blended rate or a blended value, and that value would hold for some future period of time. Each consent decree nearing its end or completion, the parties would agree to go back and renew it, generally at the stated amount or greater, including most recently during this term when it was increased, nearly doubled, if you will, but not nearly anywhere near the value predicated on real estate and then separately filed tangible. So I think the word treaty, to Mr. Cheverini's point, meant a resolution based on some legal standard or legal challenge, whereas the others, while they were primarily voluntary, they came to the city vetted them and thought this would be a project worthy of pursuit. It's a property that probably is underperforming, and the developer will come in, put in new dollars, new money, perhaps jobs, perhaps certainly bring in greater value of taxes, but we'd have to stabilize that payment for the developer to make it work. And that's where it earned its nomenclature of tax stabilization. This particular one was definitely the subject of a legal dispute that resulted in agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini, because if I remember to my recollection, that's exactly, it was a legal dispute with the assessor's office on valuations, and then there was I believe it was a lawsuit filed, and this was an exit strategy on that lawsuit. But I want to just go back to follow up a dovetail on the president's question. So just for the sake of conversations, that clears the distinction there. But for the actual TSAs now, it was the assessor's opinion, your opinion, that you should now differentiate it and put it on its own line. That's purely based on a policy decision, purely based on a legal decision, or a meshing of both?
Both.
And are there any benefits to it? Any
Yes.
benefits,
Yes.
pros or cons to doing? What are the
Yes.
benefits, sir?
No downside. The benefit is that it is a clear administrative and management of the TSA revenue as it appears by real estate intangible. And because the Division of Municipal Finance said it doesn't matter where we put it, the assessor to her thought best that we move it separately. And therefore, if there was ever a need to allow for the growth of the levy without going over the cap, this would be the opportunity to do it.
So then when a tax stabilization expires, that property will just go into the normal, into the bin of the regular revenue, tax.
We'll go
tax
back on
revenue
the,
bin.
we'll go back on the levy. That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam President.
I actually, just for the record, I have to say that I do prefer seeing the information this way. I just was trying to understand why in prior years was not done this way and what were the implications on not doing it that way. I think it's more clear. We're able to see more details of our revenues, where they're coming from. So I do prefer this format for the record. Thank you.
And Madam President, if I could just follow up with this comment, to the credit of the assessor and her staff, her ability to reach out, I give credit there because there may have been different interpretations by not just municipal government, even at the state level. I think Ms. Parry was able to find distinct ability to say it doesn't belong on the levy, take it off the levy and show it separate. And this year was a perfect opportunity to do that. So.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam President. Shall we, Mr. Mancini and is the collector on the line? Do you want? Shall we?
Collector's
go on
office
to
is
the
here.
next?
Yep. Are there any further questions for the assessor?
Well, let us stay online. I'm sure there may be questions percolate, but it is getting a little bit late. What's the time?
Yep.
It's almost 7 o'clock, so let's go to the next. Well, the only question we need from the assessor's office, we need the information by tomorrow that the readout of the differences that they found, the assessor's office found in the permitting versus, there was windows done on this permit, but then it actually was windows, doors, and roofs. And we'd like to know how many permits they processed and what they found in their inspections and investigations. Let's go to
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I may, regarding that request, is that request deemed to be going to the internal audit, or does it come before the committee tomorrow evening? The reason why I asked, Mr. Chairman, is that if Ms. Parry did need the additional time of the next day, we are meeting again on Wednesday, and certainly she could bring it before the committee on Wednesday if you prefer. But if it's going to go to the internal auditor, I will let Ms. Parry speak for herself on whether she needs that time or she can complete it tomorrow. Just give proper time to get it completed. Ms. Parry?
She's muted, Mr. Clerk. She muted herself. You need to unmute yourself, Madam Assessor.
Sorry about that. I think additional time will be necessary to compile that information.
Okay. So then then Wednesday it is then. All right. Thank you. Mr. Mancini, you want to go into this one, please?
Sure. So, Mr. Chairman, what you have before you is in similar fashion, the narrative for City Collector's Office. This office, in addition to the revenue that it collects for the city in taxes, does collect additional revenue associated with lien certificates and any costs and fees that are generated to offset the costs associated with title searches. So, based on expenditures of this department, total salaries for fiscal 21 was $767,894, a decrease of $13,928 over the prior year budget. This decrease is due to increased attrition as the city plans to delay posting vacancies and will not be filling non-essential positions in FY21. As to benefits, a $570,418 budget amount, which is a decrease of $6,712 from the prior year. As to services, the total budget for FY21 is $928,194, representing a decrease of $36,390 from the prior year budget. The city has realized increased current tax collections, resulting in fewer accounts being turned over to an outside collection agency as a result of those services. Total supplies are budgeted at $7,266. That's a decrease of $234 from the prior year, and there is no capital expenditures in this department. Following this narrative, Mr. Chairman, is the organizational chart of the city collector. The three-box report. Again, revenues were discussed as those revenues being generated by lien certificates and searching of records. The revenue for this department shows a increase expected of 14,000 over the prior year. And as to the projection for this year, we are expected to collect 500,000 in those categories this year. We do think we'll see some slight diminishment, but we will collect the vast majority, 485,000 we project. And so that projection compared to next year's budget is to your right, and that shows that difference. Moving to page, what's marked 14 at the bottom, the expenditures, comparing the 20 to 21 budget, we show you the salary to the left, a $16,973 decrease. Longevity increases by $3,000. Benefits have a total decrease of $6,712. And then we go through the various operational categories, including fees not classified, reduction of $50,000. Postage has a slight increase. Advertising and marketing decrease of $300. The total of that category has a decrease of $37,400. And then we've kept examining titles, which is predominant to the tax sale and the auctioneer services. We kept that budget neutral. And miscellaneous expenses has an increase of about $1,000. And following that, at the bottom of the page is a decrease in stationery of $234. And compares the FY21 to FY20 budget, a total decrease of $71,274. We do expect that the budget will be within budget balance range. Currently, it's showing a projection of about 21,000 over budget. That's mostly of salaries and or expenses associated with that. And so we do expect that budget to be in balance by the time we get to year end. Completes the report.
Mr. Collector, are you on the line, sir?
Maybe it is.
Mr. Collector, are you on the line, sir? So, Mr. Collector?
He's muted.
Mr. Collector, you need to unmute yourself.
There he goes.
Good evening.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. So, Mr. Collector, first, can you take me through your organizational chart in the present day scenario? Can you tell me at this point in time who's actually working, doing work for the city, and who is at home not working, and who is home and teleworking? Clearly, you must be working, so I'm going to check your name off, right? And I presume the deputy city collector is working. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct. And the assistant collector is working, and our control supervisor is working. Those are the only departments who are currently working.
So at this time, the other folks now they're not teleworking at this time, correct?
No, they're not.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. So at this time, there's no teleworking. So the tellers and the clerks are all home, not working, but getting paid a full pay from the city of Providence. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Okay. So let me ask this question. Are the number of, when phone calls come in, how does the phone call process work? As you know, for taxes and et cetera, what's happening with that?
The phone calls have been shifted for the most part to emails. If you call City Hall, you get a recording that we had a hand changing that says if you have a question for the tax collector, to send an email, and our volume of emails have gone up tremendously as a result of that. We do through other offices, primarily MCCS, and also the city clerk's office, receive phone calls where people have called into City Hall because they really, really want to speak to somebody. And and we receive a message, and then we reach out to them.
So, Mr. Collector, may I ask you a question? Do you guys have, what kind of telephone services do you have? What telephone service do you have in your unit?
Currently, we have none.
Do you have any telephones in your unit at this time?
No, except for
So No. I mean, are there actual telephones in the unit? Like when in the normal, if this was 4 months ago, when people call up, were they able to call your office at all?
Yes, we have a phone bank of 3 people.
Okay. Great. And who's those 3 people? Are they your clerks or tellers?
They are clerks. They're clerk 3s.
So let me ask you this question, and I know this. It seems to me this is a novelty for the city itself. I know of numerous places, major corporations, the state of Rhode Island. What they did was they set up, especially that kind of work, is that they would just have a process where the people who normally answer the phones, the system could be then transferred to a particular house phone or a computer or system to their home, in which then when they're sitting home, since they are sitting home getting paid full time but not working, you could actually provide a service where they could actually receive the phone calls and help process these conversations for the constituents. Have you looked into that process at all in your office, yes or no, sir?
We are taking a look at that right now. Since City Hall closed, we have been basically in battle control mode, trying to set up processes that enable what to be done. Our primary emphasis throughout this has been to get money into the bank as we have received it, but we are working with IT and within the administration to formulate policies that will enable us to do as much as we can out of City Hall.
So let me ask you, Mr. Collector, just, I was wondering, so we have a phone service with a company. All the city had to do was actually contact that phone service and talk about that process. Now, for the past couple of months, a month or so, I've been dealing with the administration and talking about these things, and clearly they just rather have people sit home, get paid, and do nothing versus sit home, get paid, and at least get some kind of work product out of them. So this is a perfect example where these folks that actually could telework. Like, this is a perfect job, especially the ones who are answering phone calls from constituents who are concerned, by the way. They have normal concerns right now during this crisis, and they're even concerned about their taxes, right? And not all my constituents have access to email. So my concern is that everybody keeps on talking about doing this. It didn't take, by the way, I almost mentioned, it took one place I know a mere 3 days to do it. So, and it was up and running. I'm trying to understand, what's so difficult for the city? Does it lack the capability, know-how, or knowledge on how to simply do this teleworking process, especially I'm thinking of the clerks. We have a lot of elderly constituents. They're concerned. They want to make sure that they want to have questions, et cetera. So, when is supposedly, I'm glad we're talking about it, we're talking about for the past month or so, when is actually something going to happen? Is it going to be like after City Hall opens up and then we basically, wasted all that time and didn't provide the services to the people of Providence? Like, when did the administration tell you that they would be able to interact or, apply a teleworking process for your office? When did they tell you? When will that happen, sir?
I'm sorry, I don't understand that question.
I'll make it simple. When did the administration tell you, or I presume administration is your boss, and they're deciding who's going to telework and who's not going to telework, and you clearly have an office that people can telework. So my question to you, sir, is when is the administration, when are you going to start teleworking? Did they give you a date and time?
We don't have a date and time. We
Okay,
have
thank
something.
you. Good. You go, sir.
Obviously, we've been thinking about this, and additionally, we are the virus for my particular office, the collector, came at a time which is normally the quietest of the entire year. That doesn't mean that there's people who are working considered essential, have not been working long hours, but we are beginning to get to a point where we will either need to call additional people in and ensure proper, safe distancing so that they can work. And we're working within the framework of the administration for split shifts and things like that. But we have been directed, and we are beginning, and I'm only beginning, to try to visualize how you set up 4 different software platforms that come along with tax collection in my office. It is not simply redirecting a phone call to person X's house.
No, Mr. Collector, I was just talking about the fielding of phone calls from constituents. You mentioned, sir, that who's doing is your office and the clerk's office. What I'm asking is, well, I was doing the most simplest of tasks. I appreciate you to up the ante to the most complex of tasks in order to devalue the question I posed. My question to you is, for the simplest of tasks, for constituents to call the collector's office about questions and answers, constituents who speak different languages, and et cetera. That is a simple matter of setting up basically an actual answering service, but we use our workers to do it. My question is, clearly there's no plan to do that. Okay, so fine, check that box off. Clearly, and by the way, if you could do that, you could still maintain teleworking, safe distance, keep City Hall closed, but yet City Hall operating. Okay? Now, the next level up of more serious tasks, there are different things you can and can't do. Now, that has to do with mobilization and computers and software. I know of one multi-billion-dollar I know one major corporation in the state of Rhode Island, as we speak right now. What they did is and this is their finance, okay. They were able to provide their employees desktops and or laptops, and they were able to now go into their system and still work a day's work of every high level accounting stuff, right? Money operations in a secure fashion and secure and safe in their home. So that next level. So teleworking can address those several issues. The city clearly isn't prepared to handle that, and probably they figure to wait it out, because by the time we get to that point to figure it out, it's too late. And if you're going to do shifts, you can't do shifts now because City Hall is physically closed, correct? So you can't bring people in the building.
This is when...
So the only answer is teleworking. That's what I'm saying to you.
Yes, well, we are beginning the process to evaluate how we can accomplish teleworking. And we may be able to have a limited opening of City Hall before all the pieces are there. But there are really no simple answers when a taxpayer calls. I have to use a tax software system to access their account. In order to see whether or not they've made a payment, I have to access the credit card processor's account. And so we have to bring all... Are you
able to do that mobily? Mr. Collector, are you, with your authority, are you able to access that mobily, or can you only access that information at City Hall? You personally, at your level?
I, through my home Wi-Fi, with a city-issued laptop, can access that. I have several people.
So by the way, you just answered. You just showed that there's a solution. You have mobility. You can do it yourself. What we're just talking about is that you could have empowered your employees to do the same. So therefore, the city does have the capacity. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you for supporting. Give me that fact to show that does exist. Let me go to the next one. I do have a letter. Actually, I have a letter from an attorney, by the way, and I want to ask you a question because it revolves around this question, which is the upcoming tax sale on May 14, 2020, right? And they're concerned the fact that they said that the way the city's conducting its tax sale doesn't give the appropriate due process and public notice that would normally have to happen. And specifically, and I'm just going to read from the thing they said, you're conducting a purported sale which is neither a public auction in which is not being held in the city council chambers advertised and noticed contrary to law. They're concerned that their clients and all taxpayers will not be able to pay their taxes at City Hall to avoid the sale. In the past, taxpayers have paid their taxes by bank check on the day of the public sale to avoid the loss of their property. That option does not exist for them anymore due to the closing of City Hall. The sale process that you're proposing for them, quote, violates state law in allowing private platform to conduct a sale with no visual oversight at the city council chambers as advertised. The sale is unconstitutional and violates due process law by allowing a private entity to sell property silently and unobserved by the public. Have you been notified by these serious concerns, sir?
Councilman, that's a letter from Attorney Ennis, if I'm not mistaken.
So you have been notified. Has the law department weighed in on that issue?
Yes, I consulted with the law department. I answered Attorney Ennis's letter today. And I indicated that we...
How did the law department address those issues, sir?
The law department found prior to our emergency request to the Board of Contract and Supply that holding the tax sale online was legal under state law.
Is this appropriate?
I don't understand that question, Councilwoman.
I don't know.
No, I'm just saying, is this appropriate to discuss this on a legal matter on this, in this format? I'm just worried that maybe Mr. Attorney Shabrini can answer that.
Sure, can answer, but it's a question from constituents about an upcoming tax sale. And that's clearly in the purview of the
litigation.
Councilwoman, it's in the purview of the public, purview of the taxpayer, knowing what will or will not happen at the tax sale on May 14th. There was questions called with a public request. The tax collector stated that he consulted with the law department, and they said, as far as their position is, that it would not be a violation. That's their answer. That's all. So then time will tell, as well as the courts will tell, whether or not it is or is not a violation, Councilwoman Anthony, because whoever represents these people and whoever represents my other constituents, they will then take whatever appropriate legal measures accordingly. So I just want to make sure the collector knew about this concern. I received several concerns, not just from one individual, but several about this issue. So I'm not asking for the legal analysis. Asking is that was it addressed, and he said it was. Mr. Shabrini, am I correct on that, sir?
I'm less concerned that there was an opinion and it was responded to, and the collector did respond. As you point out, I do not want to discuss, I don't think we should, the analysis or the overview that the law department provided the tax collector. And I'd be uncomfortable with that.
Correct. I'm with you. Thank you. All right. So, Mr. Collector, in your budget, will you ask to, Councilwoman Vice Chair Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good job.
Sorry.
You saw that.
I got it.
I was sitting patiently. Mr. Murphy, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Murphy, you have a very important job. And I am often impressed with the level of professionalism that you always present. I just have a burning desire to know, do you have a business continuity plan for your department? Because it is critical that during a crisis that you are able to provide services uninterrupted. We talked just recently about the legal challenges as well that you need to stay focused on. But do you have a business continuity plan?
The business continuity plan, or the continuation of operations plan, as it's known, exists, but it is more of these, it does not contemplate, a millennial plague such as the one we have with an extended closure of the city. So we are really making it work as we go along.
Does your business continuity plan or continuation of services that you mentioned you have a different name for it. Does it provide for IT challenges? Does it provide for loss of staff, loss of personnel, the need to relocate your office, need for mobility? I heard that you have capacity to operate mobily. Are there other staff members that have that same functionality? Because I think based on the functions in your office, I think it's critical. It's a critical component, and I'm wondering what provisions are provided for in your plan.
To be honest with you, I can write a plan now because I'm living the plan. Every person in my office, well, for the most part, the majority of them would need to have a laptop, would need to have a very high, pretty high capacity Wi-Fi service. I personally live at the end of my line with Cox, and sometimes I'm frustrated. And we could send people up to work assuming that they have Wi-Fi. I know of 2 people in my office who do not have cable at home, and therefore they wouldn't be able to participate unless the city would give them a hotspot. So we can see the way forward, having lived through this for the past 5 weeks. And it's something that we will be putting into the pipeline. I'm confident because I hear from my people that they want to be able to help and work, that we'll be able to bring, something like that into practice because frankly, I personally, and I think that it's an informed opinion, don't think that it's simply going to go away. I think we'll be reliving the process, the situation we're in right now, in a few more months, fall and winter. So we are really seriously working forward to it. I'd only like to say that we've just been trying to take care of business with an upcoming tax sale and trying to keep the Recorder of Deeds office operating, which, by the way, we've also put online and can be done remotely also. We'll be making steps in that direction in the near future.
Does your budget, does the proposed budget address or make provisions for the increase, your increased needs? You referenced laptops. I think the chairman spoke about phone technology, adding soft phones to critical employees. Any budgetary requests relative to needs?
So those sorts of things would come from the IT department. They wouldn't come from mine.
Would you express the need for them to IT? And if so, have you done that?
We haven't done it yet because we are, waiting for the format in order to be able to do it. I think that I only imagine, but I'm comfortable that this will be addressed sort of administration-wide and globally within the city administration.
Okay, thank you for those answers. I just want to reaffirm that we need to do a better job in having business continuity and budgeting to address needs of staff needing to be mobile, particularly essential staff. I know that I heard a number of instances where the city was struggling to get essential staff laptops. And I remember early on when I received my first briefing on the COVID-19 pandemic, the first thing I asked, actually I didn't ask, I was informed that the city had a functioning continuity plan. There were laptops. We actually asked if we had the ability to make sure the funding was there to purchase those laptops if we didn't have them, and to purchase the functionality to provide our staff, our critical resources, with the tools they needed to provide the services to keep the city running during this pandemic. So I did ask those questions. Those questions were answered in a positive way, that we had functioning continuity plans in place. They were regularly updated, and that we would have the ability to purchase whatever we needed to function in a mobile environment. And so I'm struggling with the fact that it doesn't appear that we've, closed the loop on those things. And Mr. Murphy, you are correct. This is the new normal. We're going to be living this for a long time. But sometimes, one door closes, another opens. I think many companies, as the chairman aptly stated, many companies have found ways to keep employees working, to keep them functioning, to give them the resources they needed and the dignity they needed as well, to continue their jobs and to provide services that they were hired to perform. So I think that we just need to be mindful of that, ever mindful, and work toward that goal. Comments, questions? I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I blended a couple in.
Good, excellent. Mr. Collector, your budget, I noticed that your salaries, why would it looks like your salaries go down? How does your salaries go down? Is that correct? Am I reading this right?
Our salaries went down for the same reason that Mr. Mancini indicated earlier, that they're not awarding promotions, not filling vacancies, and achieving that way.
So how many positions are vacant in your office then, sir?
No vacancies, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, can I comment?
Yeah, yes, Madam Auditor.
They keep saying attrition, but that attrition is the delayed wage increase, contractual increase for 1033 plus 5 furlough days. So you'll see the reduction because of those also.
Has that been agreed upon?
Yeah.
Has 1033 agreed to that wage reduction in furlough days?
Not as yet, sir.
When's the city going to come forth with an agreement that, I gather we're going to give the fire department almost a 3% raise, the police are going to give them a raise, but 1033 is going to take furlough days and put off their raise? Can you tell me when is 1033 going to agree to that specifically? I'm trying to understand how that works.
Discussions are ongoing, Mr. Chairman, and if it turns out that, depending upon how the budget process plays through here at the city council and what may assembly level, that may alter the plan. And so I think they're going to reserve that discussion a little bit further, but at this time, the administration identified where those potential savings would come from, and they're being reflected in the submitted budget. Should something change that would require us to modify that before a budget is fully vetted and adopted, we will certainly bring the information back to the city council. In the meantime, it is under consideration.
So at this time, this budget is based on a pay raise deferment for 1033 and furlough days for 1033 workers?
If necessary. If necessary.
But no, but is the proposed budget that has that assumption in it? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So when will we know whether that assumption comes true or not, becomes valid or not?
So there are ongoing discussions between the HR administration and the bargaining unit, arrive at either acceptance or some variance to the plan.
And okay, and then how much money does that deferring the pay raise and the furlough days, how much money does that equate to in this proposed budget of supposed savings?
I think the furlough days is about just under $1 million. And the furlough of the scheduled increase in pay by 6 months, 500,000, $1.5 million.
Okay. So then if that doesn't come to fruition, then it'll be a $1.5 million issue on this, in this
That is
proposal.
correct. That is correct.
All right. And Mr. Collector, so there are no vacancies in your office right now,
That's
right?
correct.
At this time, and, so there's no attrition, so none of that's occurred, so that's not, all right. So, do you have any temps in your office, sir?
No,
No, okay. And, so then what else did you have to do? Did you have to do any type of, and I'll use Vice Chair Ryan's word all the time, austerity measures? When you put your budget together, did you have to do any austerity measures in your budget? And if so, what?
we looked at our budget to see what kind of reductions we could make. And of the matter is that there's very little apart from salary in terms of our discretionary spending where cuts could be made. We are an office of salaried employees and contractual obligations and very little in the manner of, paper or other things. So we really could not achieve very much in the way of cuts with the things that I have direct control over.
Thank you. Could you just define, can you just refresh my recollection, fees not classified? What's that line item for?
Fees not classified is for tax sale searching of records.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. All right. Madam Auditor, you have some, I know you have some questions, I think for the collector also. You want to lay them out?
You said auditor, correct?
Chairman,
Yeah, Madam Auditor, I know you have some questions for Mr. Collector.
No, I actually didn't have any questions for this department. I mean, it looks pretty standard, the regular cuts. What I do like to comment on is that 1.5 million for the 1033 and 1033 impact. There is about 1.6 budgeted throughout this proposed budget for temporary employees. I think that should be known.
Okay. So that's for the temps. And Mr. Collector, at this present time, where are you with the amount of taxes collected, sir?
We are, could I clarify one point before I answer your question? You
Yes,
asked,
sir.
fees not classified is not associated with the tax sale. It is the money that we pay to collection agencies for the collection of tangible and excise taxes.
Yes, okay.
All right.
How the collection's going?
Our collections are going pretty well. We are slightly behind where we would like to be, but with the administration providing the COVID-19 relief for the fourth quarter, out through the end of the fiscal year, we think that of those with the ability to pay, they may have stretched out their payments to us. But we are kind of confident that we're going to see our way clear to collecting what we need to by the end of the fiscal year.
Do you believe you're going to meet the projected amount that was put in the present budget?
Yes, I do.
And right now, how much are you collected to date? What's the shortfall this time, today?
If I could defer to Maria Manzolillo for that, if you unmute.
Need to Maria, just unmute herself.
Yeah, hi. So right now, we are off about $10 million off of what are budgeted to collect.
And so in past years, is that pretty much on the same, is that where we are at this time last year, we were at the same point, or was it like 2 million last year, or the same?
No, last year at this time, we were at close to 100%.
All right. All right, and then I was wondering, Mr. Collector, Madam Collector, do you have any COVID-19 expenses, by the way?
we don't have, we probably could include the emergency cost to conduct the tax sale online as a COVID-related expense. But other than that,
I think you could have also included the emergency cost, by the way, to acquire computers for mobilization of your workforce, just to let you know. Now what happens is your opportunity is now missed. You could have included that. So if you guys mobilized your workforce, COVID-19 potentially could have covered that cost. So that's a missed opportunity on your side of the city side, where you could have been reimbursed on that. I just want, so all you have is that. And I have the same question for Madam Assessor. Can you please unmute yourself? Let's unmute her. Do you have any COVID-19 expenses, Madam Assessor? Need to unmute her. She's all the way to the left.
She must have left, because she has the ability to do that. I mean, I can unmute her.
All right. So for the same question, Mr. Mancini, for tomorrow night, or Ms. Silvera, can you find out any COVID-19 expenses from the assessor's office?
No.
And can we also have, by the way, from the administration, the running tally of COVID-19 expenses for the entire city of Providence? And I would once again suggest that while we're still in the crisis, you have an opportunity to acquire additional technology and be reimbursed by COVID-19 funding. So you may actually can, and I think Mr. Collector is probably correct. We probably will be having this conversation, something like this, the upcoming next 12 months, unfortunately. You know, so here's an opportunity maybe for us to get to that point. All right. Thank you. Do you have any other questions for Madam Assessor or Mr. Collector?
Mr. Chair?
Vice Chair?
Thank
Vice
you.
Chair?
Just that Mr. Murphy had stated that he didn't have his phone's functioning. And I heard him say that the folks that answered the phones would need access to certain technology that might not be readily available. And I understand that. And I understand that there's some hoops and hurdles there. However, I think that I did hear the chairman express that not all of our residents are able to, contact your office via email, and that the phone is a critical service component. So I know that our phones, the city phones, can be forwarded. So I do think that at this point, I'd like to ask if you could look at that functionality and try to provide our residents with access to your office via telephone. I think that's a simple ask, and I think it could be easily accomplished. And I'm going to ask that you do that.
I'll bring that
Mr.
forward.
Collector?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Playing the hour. Any other comments or questions from committee members? Council members? All right, well then, Mr. Collector, Madam Assessor, Mr. Mancini, and all the administration, thank you for participating this evening. We have some follow-up as we go down this journey. Hopefully you all be safe and be well. Do you have a motion to adjourn at this time?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
By Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Be well,
Thank you.
everybody.